to the ocean, take me to the sea. Wash away my worries, let my soul be free. Take me to the ocean, take me to the sea. Wash away my worries, let my soul be free.
Hello world, I'm Max. Back in IRL, I go by Curtis. Welcome to another episode of the State Copy Podcast. As always, I'll remind you to review episode 0 and its appended segments for terms, conditions, and disclosures applicable to the entirety of this content. Thank you. Well, hey everybody, good day. Welcome to another episode of the State Copy Podcast. I have struggled to release this episode for about a week. I recorded this last week. This is part 2 with Nasser. And in our first conversation, I think he had the opportunity to really describe well his background and his story around a successful startup that was all really cool. And in this episode, we kind of dive into a lot of what we think about, like sort of just a collection of random thoughts about macro and crypto today and all that. And I think there's parts of the conversation that I really enjoy. And as I watched it, like I said, with State Copy Podcast, I'm literally like learning out loud. And like when I edit this as the editor, I look at it and I'm like, I don't like myself very much in the conversation. So let me back up. There's also technical reasons why I've been struggling to release this episode. My camera settings, thankfully for the guest camera, it was perfect. But for my camera, it's zoomed in on the plant and the wall behind me for the whole episode. So I'm very fuzzy. This means I really like, just from a polish standpoint, I'm very dissatisfied with the overall quality of it. And I'm distracted with the technicals because I don't have myself set up with like a permanent podcast studio setup. I have to kind of like set everything up before somebody comes over. And then it's easy to miss a step or whatever. And I'm very focused on just being like a sort of like the engineer of the show right as I'm going to start it. And one of the reasons I really enjoy talking, and this is being self-critical, learning out loud. When I watch this show, I'm struck by just like a lot of things in self where I'm just very distracted by technically what's happening around me. And Nasser and I talked in our last episode about extroverts and introverts, and then introverts who can sort of pretend for a moment they're extroverts. And he described himself that way, and I think he did it in a really kind of beautiful way. And I really resonate with his telling of that, where it's just kind of draining, and it's almost like it's a thing you turn on that you can do. He's so much better at it than I've ever been. And that's one of the things I love about talking to the guy is, there's some people that are just remain poised and humble, and they never miss an opportunity in conversation to give you sort of sincere, thoughtful praise when appropriate. And I think most of us have a hard time even processing that when it happens in real time. I do. I like it, especially like as I'm trying to think through, is my camera actually recording right now? And yeah, I just watched a master in a conversation setting up all these points where I wish I'd responded differently, or that's cool. This is state capture. This is. As I was looking at it, I was thinking about all the ways I would edit it to where I could find it watchable, and not because of anything like Nasser's half of the conversation was Like I wouldn't change a damn thing. But my side, oh, I would edit out so much, and I'm fuzzy the whole time. And also my zoomed out shot. So I have like a camera that's looking at both of us, and it cuts off half of us for most of it. So you just get like our face. The whole thing, I was just so cranky about the quality of. But this is state capture. The imperfect is what you learn from. It's part necessary spice of the story, I think. So I'm going to release it all. And I think it would be an insult to my good friend who made a couple hours in his day to talk about a bunch of things. And I think he frames well at one point, you know, like when I talk about this shit, I got no, you know, I'm not claiming some credential that says you should elevate. I'm just sharing openly what I think about something that that there's such varied opinion on. That, I mean, you have to just, that disclaimer is very powerful. And I think when you listen to, like, and I'll tell you what, as we talk about things like crypto and macro, I sort of go in my the headspace I'm trying to be in that moment is, oh, wow, I have somebody who's also enthusiastic and he's very well informed about these topics. And that's exciting. And then I start sort of modeling in real time a lot of predictions I'm making, and I state them out loud with the certainty I feel them inside. But that has like a persuasive quality, or I'm well, you know, like I am credible to make any of these statements. Like that's the tone I hear as I go back and watch it now. I would change all that now. Like the next time for the next conversation with my really good friend Nasser, I'm going to have things well prepared before we sit down. I'm going to try and be in the head state where I can keep up with his kind of like poise in class in a conversation, which is a high bar. That's me leveling well-deserved praise back. So I hope you'll enjoy this and forgive the fuzziness of one side. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it like a remote call. I'm going to take the third camera all the way out. It's unusable. And we'll make it look like a Zoom, but we're actually in the same room, just sitting across from each other, talking. And yeah, I think that's enough setup. Thank you all so much for tuning in to any part of this conversation. You're all just the coolest. Thank you. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the State Copy Podcast. This is part 2 with Nasser Al-Saleem. Thank you for joining. Am I in your feed when I lean forward again? Yeah, I am. Don't lean forward. All right. Thanks for coming back on the show, man.
My pleasure.
So much to continue talking about. As I wasn't fully prepared this morning, and I'm running around getting camera angles all set up and everything, and we're talking, and we just covered like 3 or 4 really great things for the show, and I've heard other podcasters do this. Save it for the show. First off, like I don't even really know where to start and all that. So how did it feel doing this?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. It felt neat. I mean, well, first when I walked in and saw a legit looking studio, that I was immediately impressed by that. And then
super legit.
Well, when you're watching it on the cameras as well, it
comes through.
Yeah,
that's great.
It comes through. So
I love doing that. I love geeking out on shit like that.
Yeah, no, I mentioned that it's like the AV club, and so
That's
it was
totally
really cool.
me.
And then, I'm sure it ultimately became boring hearing about me for so many hours, but I felt like we could have just kept talking forever.
Yeah, and I really like your story for, and this is because because it's so it's so similar to journey I was on. Like so many parts of your story I can really relate to. So I don't, if you weren't like a career software person like us, I don't know how fun it is to talk. But I find, you know,
I feel like
there's more of there's so many people that did the cubicle making software job in the last 20 years that can totally relate to that, and I loved it. And
I feel like you could connect with, you know, anybody because you're naturally curious about people. But I just what I'm trying to say is that it felt effortless. It felt like any one of our hangouts minus the cameras and the lights and all of that, but and microphones. But then you sent it to me, and I was watching it, and it, you know, it was like 2 or 3 hours. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So I was watching it on and off over a period of a whole day, and I picked up my son from school, and he saw me on the video. And
Dad, you're on TV.
Yeah, he was that reaction. He was like, "Is that you?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, as if I was on, you know, primetime television,
totally
being interviewed.
Yeah. So State Copy Pod, CNN, same thing.
So that was a funny reaction he had. But it was neat. And I didn't know you were gonna, you know, send it to any other folks to take a look or listen.
And I definitely did, and I'm trying to do that more. I'd love to grow this. I'd love to. It was sweet of you to say that I'm the curious type. I think that's accurate. And
otherwise, why would you do any of this?
Yeah.
Right.
But I think we all are. You know, like I think we all are the curious type, and I think that. This time we live in is we're so distracted. Like when I tell people I found a really interesting podcast and I want to share it with them, a lot of times, like if it doesn't share something that really aligns with their interest and bias within the first like 60 seconds, it's gone. Yeah. And I think we've lost something really important that we used to have. Yeah. And this whole exercise is kind of I really want to get people, and so I put you in kind of this awkward place to tell me how it felt to do this, because I have found it in a lot of ways cathartic. I think that there's a cool thing you have to do, like in real time right now. You kind of have to, even though it's just me and you bullshitting like we have for years, you have to consider that there's a future outside audience of unknown size, and it makes you kind of aware of your words in I think just a cool way that for me I think has helped me grow. And I think that that's available to anybody if they just. You kind of have to be a little fearless and jump out and try it. But then everybody who's trying it loves it, and there's something so enjoyable about sort of being forced to have a rich conversation.
Well, I mean, yeah. For some of us, you know, people who remember a time before the internet even. Remember that feeling of connecting with someone, not electronically or digitally, right? So for me, it's nostalgic. Yeah. I'm very curious, you know, what it would feel like to someone who grew up with the internet and devices, and, you know, like our kids, for example. Yeah. Like what would be their take, and you know, the richness of the conversation aside, the long form of it, you know, that's I mean, podcasting is very popular in long form. Yeah. Right. But consider the people, the guests and the hosts, and their demographic. They're not. I've not seen a lot of 20-year-old long form. A lot of short form.
They're there, but it is a real small cross section. Like I really love like Blockworks. Michael Ippolito and Yano. Those two guys built that company, and their content is, I mean, if you're a macro or a crypto person, the upper echelon.
Right.
There is like, I mean, you can be, I mean, I would say MSN Money and that Joker.
But those are,
those are way down here.
Those are educational content. Those are concepts that you can't do in short form. You can't explain. But having a conversation like this, I just feel like everyone has to watch it in 1.5x speed, or go to the parts that everyone shortcut to the parts that people are talking about.
And for our entire history as a species, it was this. Like this is what we were made to do,
right?
And it feels wonderful.
Yeah,
like it really does feel great.
Yeah,
and it's like we got to somehow figure out a way. I'm absolutely not everything. Life was better the way it was.
No.
Technology's
No.
bad. You and I are
Right.
technologists. I've lived for this stuff.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think we need to build healthy relationships with it.
Yeah.
And the dopamine fest, just scroll through 30-second feeds of videos like the TikToks and say that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really is robbing a lot of what it is to be the rich experience of life as a human being if you just turn yourself over to that.
I mean, it's hard for me to even say to agree with that, because I don't know. That's your perspective and your take, being someone who experienced this before there was
You're right.
an internet. But
don't fall down.
But I'm sure, people grown up around this technology would have
Totally different
a
perspective.
counterpoint.
Yeah.
I'm sure valid ones. But there's a healthy middle.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the argument for the the endless scrolling of 30-second videos is that what's the harm? It's entertainment. It's people doing dumb shit. And
some of them are really creative and awesome. Like
absolutely.
It's freaking awesome. Like you remember sitting in a bar years ago and they started doing
that Chive TV
Chive
and the Fail Army and all that stuff.
Man, like
I'm glued. I can't take my eyes off of that. But
this is just that dialed up to 11.
Yeah,
it started with like America's Funniest Home Videos when we were kids.
Isn't it weird that it took
TV.
40 years or 30 plus years
Blink
to go
of
from
the eye in the cosmos.
Yeah, this is true.
I mean,
that's fine. So I'm sure there would be counterpoints that would make sense, but somewhere in the middle is where I think is the right place to be for the health of humanity, I guess. One other thing I wanted to tell you about watching the podcast is that I've never experienced this before, but watching myself, there are so many of my brother's mannerisms and way of speaking and everything that come out, and I'm like, I mean, we make jokes that my brother's adopted. His siblings, we're 4 of us. For our entire lives and we've said that he's adopted because he looks different. He's taller than everybody. He's,
right.
Paler, whiter than everybody. And
that's
to
hilarious.
See so many of his mannerisms come out in me. He's a younger brother too, so
this experience is amazing because it shows you that. It's like when I met your brother.
Yeah,
I see those mannerisms and stuff that are like,
so
and how getting to see how outside people perceive you is powerful.
Because I've never looked at myself on video for that long.
Right.
At most, it'd be a minute or two. You performed in some thing in school or whatever. Right?
Yeah, and
or
there you're on. Like you're like for a moment, your heart's racing.
Right.
And you're trying to be a character.
Right.
In 3 hours, that slides away, and you just start being you.
Yeah.
And it's
so that was interesting as well. But,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you overall enjoyed the experience, wanted to come back, because I'd like you to come do this with me a lot. I'd like this
to be
jam.
The entirety of our relationship is on camera and on mic. I mean, why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
You need a mobile setup. So
I want to low jack and record everybody. I think we're just rich.
We'll just drive around in a van.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nobody will mind.
Kidnap people and
Nobody-
interview them for 2 hours and release them back into society.
Well, we touched on a couple other things this morning that, like our fitness journeys. I think that was a cool one to talk about. And then I still want to talk about macro and crypto and all of those things and how you're processing it and really hear your side of it. Like, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's go into that. So, high level, my story, I studied the hell out of crypto, and then I went and when in the last liquidity cycle, everything came down, I went and studied deep dive into macro. And I feel like you are kind of on a similar journey in that.
Yeah.
So-
Not as deep dive into macro. I feel like I've been consuming bits and pieces of studying macro for, 25 years now. Just because of people that I worked with. When I was in college, I was interning at Motorola, and I had a coworker who was my age now.
Yeah.
Back, and he really took me under his wing. He was a great guy, and we used to go for coffee. And I mean, think about 45-year-old.
Yeah.
Walking with some 19, 20-year-old every day, going to get coffee and just chatting my ear off.
And giving their time
Yes.
to, and they really are just trying to help you. Like,
really
here's a bunch
didn't-
of shit I learned.
Yeah, I really didn't appreciate it. I mean, I wasn't. I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed the time at the time, right?
Yeah, but in the time you don't realize.
But
how,
looking back, he is almost single-handedly responsible for turning me into an investor in the first place at 20.
yeah,
Right? Getting me to graduate college because he was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Just graduate already." And then from that moment on, I was loading up on more credits per semester, just trying to accelerate finishing. He was talking about investing in Cisco. This is back in 1999 or whatever.
I feel like it had an epic run, didn't it?
Yeah.
In
Oh, yeah,
.com?
for sure. I mean, that's the whole networking. There's no internet without Cisco, right?
Yeah.
And then he asked me, "Did you invest in Cisco?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And then I realized I invested in SYSCO.
What was
like
that?
the styrofoam cups and
How'd they do?
food service. I don't know. And I immediately sold those shares and went and bought the actual
that's hilarious.
Cisco CISCO.
Yeah.
So but I learned so much about traditional equity investing. Just how to look at PE ratios and listening to their earnings reports and dividends and all that stuff. So. I mean, and I was 20, and then
That's a huge leg up.
oh my god,
huge leg up.
he was like
Yeah.
he was like max. He was like, "Oh, you're living with your parents. Max out your 401k." Who at 19, getting their first few paychecks, is thinking about maxing out their 401k? They're like, "But what do you mean? I worked and this is all the money I got.
Yeah.
I want to have it."
Yeah.
You're telling me I can't touch it till I'm 59 and a half?
I want a Nintendo 64.
Right.
Or
And it was like, I can't touch this for 40 years. What if I don't live that long? These
madness, old
these
man.
are common
What are you-
concerns.
yeah.
But he just said, pretend it's not even there, and so he got me started on that.
Yeah.
And just being patient and the long game. There's gonna be ups and downs, but overall it kind of trends in that direction.
Yeah.
So that was 25 years ago. And
Did you ever get a chance to go back and talk to that guy and
I
be
would
like,
love
thanks?
to. I would love to.
I
I kept in touch for a while. Again, this is this was like early email. I don't even think there was Gmail at the time, right? So
yeah.
so your email was your work email. That's
Yeah.
how I
And
so then he went and worked other places, and as did I. And then last I heard, he had moved to the Middle East to work there. So I still Ibrahim Cater, if you're listening to this, I fully appreciate you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. If I
Another
could,
beautiful reason to do this, everyone.
yeah, and I brought him up to several people in my life, like over the past 10 years, just telling them that he's responsible for a lot of the smart financial and career things that I've done in my life.
Yeah, and like how that spidered out, and how that translated to you sharing that same advice and passing that torch to
exactly
Ben and Henry or something, you know, back.
No, that's true.
That totally.
I remember Max. You remember Max from our? Yeah. We went to some Mexican restaurant in Boston for a happy hour or something, and this is right after we were acquired by Phillips. And, you know, as the startup, we didn't have a 401k or a 401k match or any of those things, but, you know, Phillips had. So I had gone through all the Phillips benefits, and having worked at a big company before, it was pretty standard stuff, right? So I was explaining it to them at this happy hour, like, you know, you want to make sure you do this, do that. I was kind of playing the role that this guy played for me. So I told Max, ironically, his name is Max, and I told him to max out his 401k. And I hope he did. I don't know. I mean, this is only 3 years ago, but if he just would continue on that path, and all of the young,
it leads to really
bucks,
good places.
Yes.
I mean, say what you want about the 401k.
And things are different now, obviously, you know, than they were back then with respect to 401k and matching. But, you know, a match is free money. So and it's immediately
you're taking a pay cut if you're not taking advantage of it.
Yeah, it was like something like if you invest just 6%, they matched, like, you'd ultimately get up to 13%. So that's a free 7-ish%, you know, which was really nice, and it vests immediately. So all those things were cool. So I've been nibbling on macro for a long time, but not as deep, I think, as you've gone in the last couple of years.
Definitely in the last couple of years, I've gone a lot deeper than I ever was. Yeah. You know, it's like, I think that the next level of macro, so there's a fundamentals layer that you just have to have. Like, you have to, all of these little, like, just understanding like the mechanisms of a 401k, that teaches you the different things you can invest in a 401k. Right. And then you start learning who the players are that are trading in big numbers these things. And you start learning how, I guess, all these, like, how central banking works, and, you know, how the Eurodollar works, all that is kind of next level. Like, that's where
I'm not there. I'm not at that level. I mean, I might finally understand, just at a cursory level, the Eurodollar and how that works. But not to the level of predicting anything or being able to extract any value out of whatever's happening with the Eurodollar.
Well, it's super boring.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
I tried that one you sent me, and I was like, this is...
Yeah, I think that was Eurodollar University.
Yeah.
That was...
no offense. It's just not my jam, but...
it's... I mean, well, my jam is curiosity. Yeah. And it is... I really wanted to map out, like, how structurally, like, in our engineer way that we would in software, like, how do these pieces all fit together, and how does Japan's maintaining its peg affect the markets where I live and my investments? Like, how do these liquidity flows work between nation states? And that's where studying that really boring stuff starts to come in really handy. I mean, and markets, a thing I never understood is they're completely cyclical when I was a kid. And a thing like 2008 felt like this, like, you know, the way the 1929 stock market crash, as I read in history books, like, it felt like that moment, and it felt like a comet hitting Earth or something like that. It felt like an outside thing that I didn't have any understanding of how markets predict, in a lot of ways, those things.
Yes. but still, you felt like it was a problem for people who bought homes in the previous 3 years, let's say.
Yeah.
Or it was a problem for real estate investors, or it was a problem for some companies, but not all companies. But it wasn't, the way you just mentioned, the 20s, or even, it wasn't depression level. It wasn't breadlines from my recollection. Like, it still seemed,
You're totally right.
it still seemed like, hey, this sounds bad. It sounds doom and gloom. You turn on, any station, everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
And you're hearing about bankruptcies, and you're hearing about all these things, but you're still not hearing, or thankfully, but we're not getting to the point where, rationing of food, or
children starving,
or it's not The Walking
shown,
Dead, where we're going into our neighbor's stuff to, you know what I mean? Like,
You're right.
it wasn't anarchy, and it wasn't apocalyptic, So thankfully, that's all great news, right?
Yeah.
But in our lifetimes, that is the worst that we've seen, and
Yeah.
they've been talking about it getting that bad, if not worse, in the next, or they've been talking about it for 2 years, but it's probably going to get worse. But that's where
Do you think it will? What do you think right now? Before I tell you what I think,
Yeah. Okay.
I need to turn my chair.
Oh, we're gonna
around.
adjust for this conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting serious.
What do I think?
I'm getting a crink in my neck.
What do I think? I think that the last, let's say, 10 years had been like a time of great prosperity for most.
Yeah.
Okay, and then COVID hit and all that stuff, and then everyone was talking about K-shaped recovery, meaning, like the people who were without got hit harder than the folks who were living well already. In fact, those folks really recovered, right?
Yeah.
Not only recovered, but they made out like bandits for the most part. Like, they did better
Yeah.
than they might have otherwise done. So I think there's still so much money on the sidelines waiting to invest, waiting to park into things that have been beaten down.
Yeah, everybody became so sure that it was recession time because the yield curve inverted.
Yeah.
And you had the flight to safety. You had what they called the Great Rotation, where and there was this moment where XLE and like oil, natural gas ran for a second while technology just plummeted.
Yeah.
Crypto
Right.
being at the very forefront of growth.
Yes.
And speculation on future earnings blew up first and impressively, and then you just the global economy feels like a lake to me now. It feels like a body of water that is all connected, and all the little molecules in it are, you have your little clumps that represent oil as a feed for every other output. Okay. When there's suddenly supply shocks caused by Russia, Ukraine, suddenly you hear everybody talk about it, but nothing much happens.
Right.
Then 3 months later, 5 months later, gas is suddenly around $5 locally, where it had been priced around $3.
But it's never. But it has been $5 or even $6 a gallon in the past. In other words, it's not uncharted territory. None of so far what we've seen, and I think that a lot of these things are manipulatable. And I think they're routinely, the narrative is manipulated, and we have so many tools these days to help manipulate the narrative.
Who's manipulating? Let's drill into that. Like
those who stand the gain.
Would that be like OPEC? Would that be for oil?
Not just oil.
Only for oil. Well, this is everything, right?
For everything,
I'm not picking on anything. I'm saying
for everything, I mean, like, if you want, if you have money parked, you want capitulation so that you can jump in. You want the bottom so you can jump in.
Right.
So if you keep selling the narrative that it's bad, it's really bad, it's gonna get worse. Like you're so every little dip sort of kind of dominoes into maybe a bigger dip than it would have been, because I had heard this was coming and now it's not looking so great. This must be it. To the common investors or the retail investors who are just trying to make ends meet, but like try to stay in the game.
Right.
Kind of
the
thing,
most sophisticated, they got out quick.
Oh yeah,
They've
they
been
got
parked.
out quick.
Now they're
can't
trying to convince you all to get out of it so they can get back in at rock bottom prices.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that is at play, but I also think the way we live today. So all the stats about millennials or that generation who they live with their parents till they're in their mid 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Our generation couldn't wait to get out, and I bought a house at 20 or 21. Right. So it's different. So if I was 20, 21 and bought a house because I thought it was a good investment and this is the right thing, this is the start of my investing career, right? Mm-hmm. And then I lose my job, that's a shock to me. That's a major shock, right? But if I'm living with my parents and my parents are retirees on fixed income, like they're not affected for the most part because their assets are they've got a rate
locked in or they own their house outright.
And I'm not really affected because I'm living at their home, right? So I think the cross section of the population that's impacted by recessionary events is smaller than what it used to be. This is just my opinion. This is not based on any research. This is just based on.
I think that's a valid opinion.
Like boomers are massive,
right?
And they're pretty much secure.
I want to take a moment. Like that's an important thing that you just did right there. You kind of provided a valuable disclaimer that that's just my opinion. This is not investment advice, kind of thing. So I put pretty elaborate disclaimers and terms on this content because I want to be able to talk freely about these things. This is very much just two guys' opinion about this. And I think the way people should, I think what I've tried to do as I made sort of my job absorbing this kind of material is be really open-minded about the fact that nobody can really hold all of this at once. All we can do is kind of look at it thoughtfully. Some people look at it more than others, and those are valuable people to listen to, but that doesn't mean they'll get it exactly right. And there's something really useful you can take from everybody, even if it's even if somebody gets their predictions wrong, that becomes very valuable later as a signal to understand like their thought process, to understand how they work through it. I think in crypto, macro, all these things, it's just very useful to not be so quick to condemn somebody for openly just sharing what they think, how they think shit works, and how they think, especially like predictions are. I got a leaf in my hand.
I got my own.
I'm still working on the set of the show. I just think that is really important to get out there. I don't want I don't want to take up too much time trying to hedge all of what we're going to say from here. I want to speak really freely and fluently.
Fluidly. My opinion, and my opinion furthermore is that anyone who tells you that they're certain about how any of this works is full of shit anyway. So
that's very wise words.
So just take all of it with a grain of salt. What I'm saying, what he's saying, what anyone will tell you, because no one knows.
Nobody can hold this.
Right.
This is a dance we're all doing together.
And even if you could map backward and see behavior, But as soon as you start learning from that and changing your behavior, now you become a variable in all events going forward. And so you can't predict what happens there. So unless you have a time machine, there's just or a crystal ball. There's
until we get those. Yeah, this is our system. But you're really wise to not filter, and to instead look for sources that seem very well informed, and then just hear them out. And I've found like I spend much more time listening to people talk that disagree with where my predictions are, because I don't find it as valuable. I mean, I check in with people who think very similarly to my investment thesis. I want to make sure that nothing's changed in what they're doing and how they're thinking about things, but it's not particularly valuable. It's way more useful to go look at all these people that think, something wildly different.
A lot of people love the echo chamber, right? They love being validated. That's part of the sadness of the whole state of things of social media. But don't I would say don't filter, but also don't regurgitate what you're hearing. Actually take a moment and critically think and kind of look for that visceral, how does that make you feel? When you reflect on what someone is saying.
And how can you kind of weave your
it's not A or B, it could be A and B. It could be an intersection.
It's some crazy gray in between always. And that's very hard to predict. So I generally like with pseudo retirement, I spent a good chunk of time just studying and educating myself in macro, and that meant absorbing a lot of material like this. And just pro tip that came from that would not be anything about specifically what to invest in or anything. It's that ability to take in outside information and not waste any time being angry at other people for where they get predictions wrong, or bickering. A lot of the airwaves on Twitter, and I mean, like, bickering's healthy. It's like, but dialogue is healthy. Like, time spent going. So on crypto, it's very tribal. There you have. Let's go into crypto. So, and I want to talk about technology. You brought that up. Like, let's talk about because that plays into my thesis a lot. Basically, I'm at a point where with crypto, where you've got Larry Fink at BlackRock pushing an ETF that's definitely going to get approved.
Why do you say that?
Because he's Larry Fink. Because BlackRock's never been turned down for an ETF.
Is this the first one they've?
First Bitcoin one. Okay. Yeah, there's been several Bitcoin. There's been several attempts at Bitcoin ETFs, and they've all been rejected. But then there's the SEC does several rounds of approval, I think there's several contenders that have been rejected. And I think what's going to happen is, now that BlackRock submitted theirs, now all the Bitcoin ones are just going to get approved in one lump sum.
So, a few things on that. So, first of all, when does that decision come out?
So, a lot of insiders, now this would be people that, big hedge funds and all that.
Because the SEC usually comes back and says, okay, we'll have a judgment for you on this date. Yeah, right? Do we know what that
4 to 6 months.
Okay.
They're saying, and there's people that are very in the know, because they're the people that have to, that are going to do a lot on the back end with suddenly there being a Bitcoin ETF. So this is once that becomes possible, then people can, in their retirement, portfolios, they can allocate a portion to, and so
Right.
there's all the people on the back end who, like at a Phillips, want to make that available to their investment pool that is their employees
Right.
and
So
stuff
why
like that.
hasn't this been built into the price? I mean, if what you're saying is true, BlackRock's never been turned down, and it's Larry Fink, and now it's common knowledge that they've submitted that. It is built. So that jump from 25 or something to 29 to 30,
like 50%,
That's
like that move was all of that.
Okay.
And a lot of it is, and you don't know how much, like, are they buying on the back end? Are they buying like OTC, over the counter? This is where, so you have spot markets where there's like a bid and an ask in real time. And if a whale, somebody who wants to buy a whole bunch, shows up, suddenly the price, it just blows out the spread between the bid and the ask when suddenly a whole bunch more volume demand shows up. So markets don't work that way. Instead, they, in the back end, they make all these private agreements with holders to buy at, elevated prices. And that does affect spot over time. And we'll see that. And there's a bunch of people, still only like less than 2% of the world is taking crypto seriously. Because but now you have all of the most sophisticated, all of Wall Street, like everyone, it's no longer an if, it's a when, and it's a what.
It's no longer an if, it's a when. We've felt that for a while. And we felt that more from a technology perspective than any kind of libertarian view.
And why? Why have we felt that? Like from a technology perspective, what does it offer?
Because for me, because we have software backgrounds, and it's let's take Bitcoin specifically. It's a pretty elegant solution.
Yes.
I mean, it's,
when you look at it technically,
it's simple, yet elegant and applicable. So many, at least the concept of blockchain. Even forget Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Just the concept of a blockchain.
Decentralizing.
Yes.
The ledger, taking the control away from any one individual and making it an open source software.
Trustless is I mean, it's
mobile.
brilliant.
You can, if you can remember a seed phrase, you're not carrying around a wheelbarrow full of heavy gold bars.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody does that. What you're doing is you're just paying somebody else that holds it and then gives you a piece of paper that says you own a portion of the gold that they've parked in a vault somewhere.
Right.
This is in code saying, rather than do that, let's do something we can all audit openly and we can be provably incorruptible.
Yes. Yeah. And open source and all of that helps as well. So
right.
So from a technology standpoint, I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I think the libertarian view and the sort of, what any government would say is an anarchist view is actually like kind of hurting the cause a little bit, but it's also that
it was necessary for initial growth.
Yes, and it needs to get out there as well. Like people need to know that there is that potential application of decoupling from governments and centrally backed currencies.
And the argument that they're always going to tell you is, well, the governments they will never go for it, but the governments are going to be joining in. They're going to need it also because
they can't beat them, so they're going to join them.
Right.
But they're going to join them with their own flavor of something that they can control.
Sure.
And
they'll set up a CBDC that sits on these rails.
Yeah.
But you already, like Australia, just set up their own CBDC. They're going all digital.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course we're going to do this. We don't go backwards.
How come we don't hear about any of the lead up to that, but we suddenly hear about the news story that breaks that they've pulled 500 million or whatever in dollars out of circulation, in Australia.
It just gets dropped on you.
Yeah,
one day.
you're just
well,
like,
I mean,
well-
like folks that are paying attention to crypto and macro,
They would know.
We know it's coming.
Yeah,
we know this is a countdown that is inevitable. There
Right.
there is no plan B. There's no plan stay on the old system because there's so many technical advantages. And one thing people, this is like a profound observation that I had recently-ish, that the entire system, that how we pay our bills, how we put food on the table for our kids, how we pay for the roof over our heads, how it spiders out is from growth. So there's never an option to say, because you get a lot of people that say, well, is this technology good for us? Is TikTok destroying our children's minds? Like there's all the pushback against growth, technological, and how, like, if we could go back to being like natives, living much more in touch with nature, perhaps we'd be more happy. But if you want to just look at scaling out what humanity is, like if you want to feed 7 or 8 billion people, you have to be able to scale it. If you want to educate 7 or 8 billion of people, you have to scale it with technology. And so we've set up a system of governance and money, and it's like if you just picture humanity moving through time like a whole bunch of plates being spun, that mechanism that spins all those plates is progress. So we never get to make the decision to stop the plates, because then all of the people that are making money in, let's say, hardware or software, like our business, developing new technologies that make suddenly this TV show that I'm producing possible.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't possible when we got out of high school. Now it's very possible to do. That came from this technological growth. Now, if we had just decided at one point, hit the brakes, we want to stop, then suddenly the software and hardware engineers would not get a paycheck. They'd be out of a job. They'd have to go find something else to do. What would that be if it's not building new tech? Now, they'd also not be able to go out to lunch or pay for their childcare service. So those people are out of a job. It ripples out, and you find that the driving force that pays to, that feeds and shelters and educates humanity is progress.
Yes.
You don't get to opt out.
Right. So if we go back to macro and add crypto now,
Yeah.
can you...
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully one day they will really be the same thing. But so the everyone make the case for crypto as a solution to the inflation and money printing and all of that. How does it fix all of that?
So there's a lot of factors. I got into this in my podcast a few back with Hirsch, where we were trying to define inflation. It is such a hard thing to wrap your head around, and it's because you have, on one level, inflation is a supply-demand dynamic. It's like suddenly, like Hirsch said, too much money chasing too few goods. And that drives up cost of goods. But then you have this thing that is separate from that where inflation becomes sticky. Because the knock-on effects of, let's say, an input like oil suddenly being much more expensive, how that ripples out into your bill when you go to a restaurant this evening for dinner.
Yeah.
Like that span of time, and then how that rolls back. You know what I mean? Like, it's because all of this is like a big liquid, like I said, a pool with ripples in it. So Web3 isn't going to solve the supply-demand dynamic of certain goods, let's say.
No, okay, sorry.
You know
Let me back up. Let's take, I guess, inflation not as the...
You want to say debasement instead?
Yeah, not as the key boogeyman inflation, but if everyone says, they're going to have to turn on the money printer.
Yeah.
There's no choice, right? It seems like it's a system of constantly picking the lesser of two evils, but nonetheless they're both evils, or they're all evils. And so how does crypto address that or fix that?
In a few ways.
Give them a positive way out, not a picking of two evils.
Well, the hope is that with crypto, we get a whole lot technically that allows it to endure and to be more resilient over a period of time than our old attempts at monetary systems. And this is because it's decentralized. You don't have like one nation state being able to rack up a lot of debt and then print their way out of it. And when we say print, there's no more, it's all digital. This is all balance sheet growth at banks and central banks. So this is them just creating new rows on a spreadsheet that have a debasement effect, and that's separate from inflation. That's where there's just suddenly more money then it brings the value of all of the money down and the price up of all assets.
Sorry, I was going to
interrupt.
Well, you mentioned some things there. So, part of the reason for why our financial system is the way it is, part of it is for national security, right?
Yeah.
To be able to, with the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, be able to take Russia out of SWIFT and those kind of things. You can see why naturally governments are going to fight this completely decentralized global thing.
Right? Because they become much less significant as a result. They become much less a factor. It takes away much of their power, and it becomes. And this is where Balaji's network state is where I think truly all of this is going. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of inevitable that we will get to a place where this whole what group of us has the biggest stick to enforce. I think that whole dynamic gets kind of pulled out of the equation. But it's going to be a progression. And I think people just don't, it's so hard to forecast how something will play out over time as significant as a transition from a global reserve currency enforced by one global superpower to a balance of power that's just not that anymore. And all of this disruptive technology that shows up. You had the Dutch were the reserve currency, I think, and then it was pound sterling. And these things follow a cadence that tracks really well with the fourth turning cycle as described in that really great work, The Fourth Turning. We just have this 80-year cadence where geopolitics shifts because either there was too much debasement and everybody else started getting screwed, and so they started building up their military might, and then you have open conflict. But now we're at this crazy stage where we have things like mutually assured destruction, and nation states can't fight. We're in World War III already started, but it's a proxy.
Yeah.
And it's different than in the past.
Okay, so that this 80-year cadence has not been affected by technology. It's still 80 years. It's not been accelerated by technology.
This is the first time it's going to be very disrupted because our technology through modern compute, open source, decentralized. This is why crypto is inevitable. It's not going to be a question of like whether the BRICS nation, in my view, again, this is an observer looking at it. You don't really have to worry about like Brazil, China, Russia, the BRICS nations getting together, India, and saying like, we're going to use gold to settle our transactions. Hard money has a whole bunch of problems because it's not elastic in supply. We've already tried it and it failed multiple times in history. And those nations feel less good about the current, like the renminbi or the ruble than they do the US dollar, even now. You know, like even Vladimir Putin is going, yeah, I want to settle in gold. I don't really want your renminbi. Yeah. China, like, and they, if you look at the geopolitics and the history between Russia and China, they've not always been like super great buddies. There's been border skirmishes.
They just have common enemy. In the United States,
and this is just a very different technology. In the singularity moment is causing, it's like all of the rules of how we rip up the rules and start over have changed in this cycle. So this is a grand experiment of the euro dollar. If you go study it carefully, is at its end of life. We're basically at, and when you look at everything that's happened since 2008, and you look at how all of the like global GDPs were on a trend like this, and now they're like that. How basically, and now you're at this point where, like Japan is having to stabilize its currency by selling long-term treasuries. And that's creating this offset where, like, at a moment where everybody's going, oh shit, all of history tells us that there's going to be like this huge economic apocalypse coming. And that's how everybody has been positioning, right? But then the playbook said you would go buy treasuries at this point. But enough of the big players, like in sovereign debt and or sovereign wealth, I should say, and pension, and all of these players are sophisticated enough to see that the eurodollar's end of life. And the playbook's changing, and they're seeing that there's this sell pressure on things like long duration treasuries. And also you now suddenly have inflation in the reserve currency to contend with, where if I'm getting a 5% yield on a 30-year bond, am I sure that in like 6 more years, we're not going to have a period of 20% inflation or something? You know, like real inflation? Like they're all seeing this and going,
what are they going to do?
Well, what they are doing is countries like the BRICS nations are coming up with ways to settle in things like gold, and it's imperfect and it's not great, but they're not.
Do you think Bitcoin is something they'd adopt for that?
Yes.
Really?
I think that's coming.
Really?
Yeah, but it's further out. I don't think it's this cycle. I think it's next cycle. I think the other nations are all positioning. You see across Europe, and parts of Asia, where they're heavily setting up all the regulation necessary because the writing's on the wall. But there's a lot of game theory that has to play out on transition, and there's crypto's not ready yet for prime time. Well, it's getting ridiculously close. It's getting ridiculously
And when
close.
you say crypto, what are you specifically, which ecosystem?
Well, so using, I feel like my edge in that space is 20 years in software. You know, and that's what, and hiring software engineers, I can listen to the founders of like Avalanche, Solana, Near, Ethereum, whiteboard out their different approaches to solving for decentralized consensus of a ledger. And that's our superpower. That's where I think just cubicle dwelling Curtis and Nasser have an edge over like a Jim Bianco or somebody who's Wall Street, who's far more sophisticated in their understanding of macro and finance. But they're having to, because they didn't spend, you know, years of their life sitting around the table with a bunch of software engineers who were, you know, all the people I worked with were much more competent than me. Like I think you described really beautifully in a humble way, like your ability as a coder, but then like your trajectory had you interacting with all these people. So I channeled that knowledge and experience into like a 6-year now study, deep dive of that space. And what it told me is the entire space is a sandbox right now. So a lot of the metrics that like a Jim Bianco and, you know, and I don't mean to pick on you, Jim, I'm sure you'll never see this, but just in case, I'm so thankful for a lot of the content I've gotten from people like that. And I'd love to just sit them down and be like, but have you considered talking to like a software engineer about where technology is likely to take us?
You don't think they have? Or he has?
I think that there's like a little bit of an echo chamber where...
But I feel like you could have such easy access to software people. I mean, there's no shortage of software folks, right? And if you're doing any amount of proper due diligence, you'll talk to some software folks.
So the ecosystem, I think, is kind of the backbone of all of Web3. Yeah. And it's inevitable, like I say, crypto's inevitable, is Solana. I think Solana wins this, and I'll put a pin into that.
Yep.
But somebody like Jim would say, and I actually heard him on several podcasts alluding to the fact that Solana is kind of like a knockoff, a scam. They really buy into the whole, like a lot of people thought like FTX was Solana. But
that's his justification because of their close ties.
I need to set some context for your last question, which was, why does Jim Bianco or somebody like him why does 98% of crypto, which I would say is mostly old money crypto, so the people that got to Bitcoin really fast because they were mining it in 2012 and it made them gazillionaires, and so now they have a big they have a lot of experience with the ebbs and flows of the liquidity cycle, macro. They're very sophisticated in their knowledge of that, and there's a lot of finance. There's a lot of people who built things that all these financial instruments that are getting built as part of DeFi.
Right.
And that's just all of the primitives that the Eurodollar uses. And I just mean, you know, all of these markets sitting on top and settling every type of commodity and service industry and all of these collection of things. They're building that out now on a decentralized software rail. And here's the thing. If you're a Wall Street type, you can't make any sense of that whiteboard discussion I was describing of Anatoly Yakovenko and the founders of Near. There's one that was really helpful for me where I watched them whiteboard it all out, and it told me so much about like I looked at it as a hiring engineer. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, who's right here? And I listened to how they thought through their thesis.
Yeah.
And so the people in Wall Street who are wanting to build out the future of money, and the thing is they can't think and they can't program parallel threaded applications. They needed a simple sandbox with something like the Ethereum virtual machine that was really constructed by a genius kid.
Yeah.
But he was very junior. And you know, in engineering terms, that's powerful, but it's also like you need those like 40-year-old people with 15 years software experience to say that thing you're doing right there is going to create all these problems over here, here, and here later.
Yeah. People who could recognize that pattern of being excited about some path or solution, but knowing that it leads to a dead end, most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those folks went out and the ones that when I look at Solana, I see something much more sophisticated that will scale to the whole planet and can support 8 billion people.
Yeah.
And there's something very important about a monolithic system that can settle transactions in 400 milliseconds, speed of light over fiber. Because all of these layer 2 ZK rollups, all of these things.
Why do you say monolithic system? What do you
That's
mean
what Solana is.
Okay.
Solana is a monolithic like settlement layer of everything where you don't create Polygon on top of
because it is the layer 1.
Yes.
Is that why you say
it's
that?
the layer 1 that does everything.
Yeah.
And so it's inevitable to me that it will win eventually.
Yeah.
Just from a purely engineering perspective. Like I look at it and this is not a thing. Most of crypto and crypto Twitter thinks this is going to be settled as an argument. And it's about network effect. No, that's not how technology works.
I mean, yes, people can and will argue about
and that's
it
and it's important.
Endlessly, yes. But you know.
But where it all ends up is going to be
based
product
in
market
fundamental
fit.
Yes, and product market fit is the scale, the speed of it, transaction costs, all these things, the applicability, the composability, all those things win out over we barely scratched the surface of the demand for this once everybody's using it, and we dream up new use cases. And it's not like Blu-ray versus HD DVD.
No,
it's not VHS.
It's orders
versus,
of magnitude between.
Right.
VHS Betamax.
Right.
We're not talking about 20% better where it could just be settled. We're talking about, no, this thing is like 100,000 times faster and cheaper now. And then when things like Jump's Fire Dancer gets deployed and you have an alternate validator full node stack that integrates with the protocol.
Are you nervous about that it's such a big release? It's such a big new thing, and there's already so much FUD about Solana going down and their quality issues and this and that. But it's old news, and a lot of it is just FUD, right? But are you nervous about the new round the new wave of FUD that'll come out, if anything were to happen?
Not really. That's software. If it does, I'm as a hiring manager, I looked at all the teams and I hired that team.
Yeah.
And so that means software is buggy, and I think that we need things like Bitcoin so that people can hedge for when we trade geopolitical risk for smart contract risk, and where we take suddenly exploits and stuff like that. Like, I think we need all these other things. Like, I wouldn't discourage the Aptoses and Suis of the world from trying to compete, but it really is like the benchmark is Solana. I mean, like, you need to be able to compete with Solana if you want to have any opportunity. And you can do ZK rollups on Solana.
Yeah.
And so that's where like you can do all of these things Ethereum wants to do with just a much more. And the thing that the edge, I think the software engineer has over the finance person is we know how difficult it was, because the Jim Biancos of the world see something like a Solana as a knockoff, as something that was just spun up where you forked something like Ethereum and you don't realize how fundamentally different the architectures are and all of the primitives and all of
So is that the main reason why, because if everything that we're saying is true, right, and I've seen this in Twitter here and there, is that, like, Solana's got all the tech but none of the marketing and whatever, and there are other chains who have the inverse of that. They've got all the marketing and they're
Polygon versus Solana, right?
Right, but the tech is not there. So at the end of the day, it's got to be both. I mean, you can have the greatest tech, but if you can't sell it or you can't install it or no one will bite,
I think what Solana's doing is very sophisticated. I think the team is just playing just a completely different game. They're using all of their resources to prop up the development community, because they understand that's where really it is. So like, there's nothing stopping you as a builder from looking at all of the infrastructure choices you have and going in a sophisticated way. All right, I want to create Uniswap, but I want to put it on rails that 9 billion people can use. And that can explode out. Maybe Elon will get his friggin' colony on Mars in 100 years. We'll have a lot more humans, and there'll be use cases that span way beyond what we can even imagine today. And we will need something that was architected from its base layers to scale. And I kind of lost, what was the last thing you said?
Just having really good tech, but the marketing not, or,
right.
or the adoption.
Yes, tying it back to business development and marketing. So I think that's very clever of them to do up front, and I think it works up front. But long term, what'll happen is a developer on Solana will go steal the idea. Not steal, it's not these are all open source projects.
Right.
But what they'll do is they'll go, oh, but you built it in an environment that doesn't scale. And I know that if I take structurally what the finance person built out on the EVM and I build it with the Solana virtual machine in an environment that scales, I can, you can have, I was listening to Tolly was on a podcast. He did a couple podcasts this week, and I watched one of them with Tristan, the guy from Backpack. And Tolly was pointing out that, like, there's they watch on-chain analytics pretty carefully. There's a few traders, wallets, that are doing like 25,000 trades a day on Solana using bots. Yeah. I mean, they're training AI.
You couldn't
bots.
do that on Ethereum or anything else.
And the biggest protocols where all the TVL and everybody thinks crypto is. They settle like 2 an hour, or sorry, 2 a minute, 2 transactions a minute. It's and what's going to happen is when crypto adoption occurs, it's going to be because somebody built all of this stuff in a place where it can scale and people can use it like they use Web 2 things, and it's indiscernible. But it's fully Web 3. It's decentralized. There's all these things that protections in place that make it superior.
Right.
But it has to be parity with what they have before they're going to move over. Yeah. And what I think our edge in the space is we can see that. And so if you go look at like Logan Jastrzemski is a podcaster. He's a guy who came from Tesla, and he was a engineer, and he got to crypto. He started paying attention to it, and I followed a lot of his podcasts because he's an engineer investor. He's but who went the media company route and the whole doing this type of thing, like Blockworks. Yeah. He actually met with the Blockworks team, and I noticed a measurable shift in specifically like Michael Ippolito from Blockworks after that podcast that Logan Jastrzemski did with them. Because what I think Logan did is there's a moment where he said, this whole thing you guys are doing is pretty cool, isn't it? Like, it gives you an in with all of the teams in Ethereum, and it gives you an investment edge because everybody wants to talk to you. You as a podcaster give them free marketing for their products, so they welcome you in to talk to them. And then when the microphones are off and the cameras are off, you're also getting to develop relationships with teams that are building out the Uniswaps and all these things. Yeah. And this is why you feel like, and he's kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Being that for a community is a powerful edge as an investor. And there's a moment where the dynamic, like I really liked that podcast because it was like this dynamic where there's this new up and comer who's getting started, but he's actually teaching them. He's like, hey, I'm doing that over here in this ecosystem that everybody thinks is a joke or a scam. Yeah. And I'm doing it with the engineer's perspective that this is where everything's going to scale.
What ecosystem is that?
Solana. Yeah. He's created I don't know if it's a hedge fund or what he's building with one of the more popular, one of the larger voices in the Solana ecosystem. Solana Legend is his Twitter handle. Soul Legend. Yeah, I've been talking to that guy on Twitter back and forth. It's that they are building in that environment, but shortly after that, you see Michael Ippolito responding on Twitter to somebody saying, who's a completely underrated, what's one token that's going to surprise everybody? And he goes, Solana. And
how recent was that?
That was after that, and that was a couple months ago. But now you have Michael Ippolito at Blockworks, who these guys were sure it was going to be Ethereum.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But now suddenly, like that guy, his handle on Twitter, his avatar is Mad Lads from Solana.
Okay, but why I ask when was that? Because I feel like over the last last year or the year before. That answer was obvious. Like it did really take everything by storm and surprise everyone, right? But to say it just as recently as 2 months ago, after everyone kind of already knows what it is and what it's about.
Solana?
Yeah.
Oh.
To say Solana just as recently as 2 months ago. Because the word is out. Like there was that
the word
thing
was out
when it was
and it blew up to
$270
a token, and then it crashed down to $8 or something.
So the word was out,
and then the word was out that it was all going to collapse, and it was Sam coin and all that nonsense.
That's every day.
That's
you look
every
at
day.
Twitter,
but that was powerful, and that persisted. Right. But now suddenly you see this shift where a lot of Chris Berniski, a bunch of the most sophisticated players in crypto are going, you guys got to come look at this. Or not even you guys got to come look at this. We are investing in this. There's a lot there. So, it's the third largest ecosystem in crypto is Solana. Yeah. And when you have that kind of network effect, when you have the fact that its validator set is more than half the size of Ethereum now, and it's cheaper and faster and why
You just wish
you can't just wish Ethereum into being
No,
winning.
I agree.
It has to actually do it.
What you do wish is that the price action of Solana, follows the trend that you're describing with respect
Well, my
to.
game is not to trade.
No,
my
I know.
game is to pick who's going to win this. Like, who is the inevitable winner now,
Yeah.
using my experience, and
Yes.
and
But
that
as
tells
it's
me
winning, you
Yes.
want it to be rising, not trading on volatility, but you'd like it to show some.
be nice. But well, for me, I really am. I'm trying to take emotion out of it. Look at the
Yeah.
technology objectively.
Yeah.
And take the tribalness out of it, and just go like, do the Ethereum maxis? So I spend a lot of time listening to the Ethereum maxis, and the Near and the Avalanche people and the Cardano, like they all get some time. And I'm just like, are you doing anything novel that can compete with this monster that is Solana? And the new up and comers, the Aptos, Sui, say, like, are you doing anything, like, what are you bringing that's going to compete with, and never mind Jump Crypto and Fire Dancer, when you're talking hundreds of thousands of transactions per second at Solana's cost. Now, like, how are you going to compete with the fact that Solana architected their protocol? And it's really hard this is very hard to do, to get it to run in parallel, with parallel processing in a decentralized network, and that's pegged to like CPU cores. Now there's a stat.
I think that is the single most
that's what's
brilliant thing, because then
Moore's law kicks in at some point.
Yeah.
And it is. Somebody put up a metric of TPS stats on Solana over the last 2 years, and it's double.
Yeah.
How did that happen? All the validators are running twice the cores they were.
Right.
It's the only protocol that designed for that, for just pure hardware. And that's how, and that's why I say, like, when I'm looking at, I wanted to basically butt complete. So you won't find me like on Solana, even though I've been there since get-go. I'm not going to waste any time on the, and it's very, I don't want to, I think the things that like the Solana legends and the Soul Big Brain and all of these people who are personalities on Twitter who've been there the whole time, like being like defenders and getting, because that was so vital for keeping developers there.
Yeah.
And like it's very important, but for me, I don't really want to participate in that. I don't think that's it's not, I don't find that particularly fulfilling.
Yeah.
So, but I understand it and I appreciate it. And I'm grateful that there are people that do that.
Yeah.
But for me, this is all, and this is why I don't think, like the founder, you don't see Anatoly Yakovenko going up and shitting on everybody else's projects, because the person that could architect what Solana is at the time knows this is all going to get to a point where if you come up with something really incredible that's valuable to put on top of Web3 rails that actually brings in the masses to crypto, you're going to have to do it on something that is at least what Solana is.
Right.
Now, the question is, does Ethereum get there eventually? And I think because of limitations and constraints like the EVM, where you don't have parallel processing, I just don't think it ever gets there.
How hard is it for them to fix that?
It's hard. I mean, well, what you have to do is you create another chain that settles on Ethereum that isn't limited by those constraints, using things like zero knowledge proofs.
But isn't settlement is everything, though, right? Isn't settlement
is everything?
The legitimacy layer?
But if you're not getting anything, so here's like where Ethereum loses me is why do I need to settle on Ethereum if Solana is every bit as secure?
Well, yeah, right. That's what I'm saying.
What am I getting?
Right.
And what you're getting is the network effect. They were the first one to do smart contracts, and you've got a lot of big money players. You got the Jim Biancos of the world who think that that's the future. Yeah. I think that Ethereum does well in this next cycle.
I mean,
because this is still unknown. Nobody can see this without a very explicit background.
Right.
Specific.
Yeah, I think the analogies, maybe loose analogies for Ethereum are because they were first and early and proved out a technology. They're they're the Motorola
Incumbent.
cell phone, the Nokia, but where are those companies today? They're not even in the game, right?
Yeah.
So being early and being first doesn't always guarantee you longevity.
But I wouldn't, I'm not rooting against them.
No, I'm not either.
Right?
I'm not either.
I hold some Ethereum NFT. I think some of the NFTs will, because it was that.
Yeah. I don't think you can root against anything in this space because we still have the common goal of, hey, we need this space to be adopted.
Yeah. So I root for crypto.
Yeah,
I'm rooting for decentralization, all of the technical benefits. And I don't really want to, so many people want to reduce this to a tribal fight.
Right.
And it shouldn't be that. Yeah. It should be let's just solve a very difficult problem.
From an outsider's perspective looking in, that just makes it seem like, it's just a bunch of kids fighting about something, on the playground, in the sandbox. It's not real. It's not Congress people in suits, arguing on the Hill about something. So it's not legitimate, but it's legitimate.
Everything starts somewhere,
right?
And now you've got Larry Fink pushing an ETF for Bitcoin. The next phase will be the Ethereum one, and then there'll be a Solana one. And that's just how this stuff works. And
that's more of a hill to climb, though, right? Because of the whole perceived securities nature of Solana and Ethereum at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's in other words, just time. It's like there's going to be... But that's
still a hurdle, because the SEC's come out and said everything but Bitcoin is essentially a security, right?
Right.
So they feel confident in the Bitcoin application being approved soon, soonish or at some point, but
they don't want to give a blank check to everybody else.
Right. So I think we're ways out from Ethereum or Solana one because that is the SEC's made it a black and white issue. You're either a security or you're sufficiently decentralized, and then they're also kind of owning the definition of decentralized, right?
Yeah.
They're not looking at Nakamoto coefficients or any of that kind of stuff. They're just looking at
value can accrue using your token, so you're a security, and we don't want to let regular people trade in things that accrue value over time.
Right. So weird. So there has to be something very fundamental that changes. Like I'm saying, going from the Bitcoin ETF to any of the others,
I think it happens
something
faster
very fundamental has to happen. Like the SEC maybe has to finally put out regulation or come out and
I think the first one's the hardest.
I actually think the second one's going to be harder.
The second one's the hardest?
Yeah. In this case. Just in this case.
Well, it's apples and oranges. So Bitcoin is never, no matter what the Lightning proponents, the laser eye Bitcoiners want to think, I think that Bitcoin is extremely important. I don't invest in it directly, but I do options with MicroStrategies because it's just such a no-brainer to get more upside out of something that is going to double or triple.
Yeah.
its all-time high in the next liquidity cycle. I would say, my targets, studying the network effect of Bitcoin carefully for this next, once everything goes bonsai again, which it inevitably will because this markets are cyclical.
Yeah.
When that happens, then my target for Bitcoin is like 90-ish.
90K.
Yeah, which is awesome. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a
that'd be great.
3x in the safest asset in crypto.
Right.
But
What
then
yeah.
MicroStrategy's so far in like an options contract is moving like 3x that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're pretty confident, the safest bet in crypto, that I would say, even with all my opinions about like layer ones being a lot more significant, and my whole thesis I laid out about Solana, I think you still need a Bitcoin and probably an Ethereum as just gold and silver for smart contract risk.
So you're looking at Ethereum also as a store of value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and something like I think it's what they did with their yields, with the burn, creates like a base layer similar to like treasuries, where we're going to experiment with that being like a base layer for risk for a while, and it can survive just as being that instrument.
Yeah.
Like it can just be for
because that's not dependent on throughput or transaction costs, really.
Yeah, it's analogous to like if Japan wants to settle 100 billion equivalent dollars today in Bitcoin later, that can happen at much lower frequency, and I think Ethereum can still totally be that. So I just don't think it'll be the backbone of everything, and I think there's a lot more value accrual potential in that thing. So you'll see me weight my bags far heavier a Solana than Ethereum, but I still think Ethereum has a place, and it's a really important place. And Bitcoin too,
right? Well, it has an important place also because there are so many. The ecosystem is so big. There are so many adopters and developers. You don't want them to just kind of scatter. You want them to stay.
Yeah.
At worst, you want them to move to a Solana ecosystem and develop and build that ecosystem out further. But you don't want them to give up on crypto entirely and go away.
Yeah.
So
and I think when there's things like in Solana where there's like anchor anchor protocol or something it's called, and I want to say the jump team is behind that also, but it's just a bunch of developer tools that make it a hell of a lot easier to work with the Solana virtual machine. Those things, as those evolve, it will become software. It will become as easy, because you won't have to do all the memory allocation and all of that craziness to just compose with something.
Oh, it'll be, no one talks about sockets and HTTP layers and MAC layers. Those are all things that the networking guys talk about. Yeah. And even they have tools and things that abstract away all of that. They're just using off-the-shelf packages and things. So no one is even talking about any of this technology in our hands as the internet, really. It's just...
but it is all that.
It is all that.
Web3 is the internet first.
Yes, right.
And these were all things... All of this is just layers in a stack. And we're just getting a more evolved layer of the internet now that's been missing this whole time, because from an engineering and computer science perspective, it was a really hard problem.
Yeah.
And now we've scaled hardware and hardware interconnect that we can support it. So it's inevitable.
Yeah.
It is just a thing that will happen. And I think that, that's where my pushback is to, I want to say it was either Bankless or Blockworks that just interviewed an early to crypto, old money crypto, as I like to say, who created an investment fund. And they went over their NFT thesis and a bunch of other things, but they just...
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about any of that.
Yeah. We can get into that. They entirely... So they dismissed all of the high performance, high throughput chains as being a scam.
Based on what?
It was the guy's contention was that all of these, like the design of financial and social software that sits on top of Web3 is the real good stuff, is the important, is the hard problems to solve, and that's where you want to get behind. He was kind of in that camp that things like a Solana that are doing, the implication was that it was a smokescreen. Like you're using technobabble. Yeah. You're talking about all of this, parallel processing.
You're talking about metrics that aren't going to matter when you have a layer 2 on Ethereum. That's
use case is all that matters was what his thesis was, and he's saying you're ignoring all this nuance was the word he used. But I'm like, you are dismissing. You're just saying that. Well, to most people, I think software generally is magic. It's something they get the app they buy the phone from the store, and then they download the app onto the phone, and then it just does stuff. Yeah. And there's no appreciation. Everything is apples and apples, but no, there are definitely apples and oranges in software. And the thing like a Solana is much, much more complex in its architecture and implementation. And the expertise required, and
but what
he's
saying, what he's saying still stands in what your rebuttal is, that it doesn't matter. It's the use case that's going to win out, not how complex the design or the implementation is.
But you can't dismiss the technology behind. So yeah, I agree with with a huge part of his thesis. I just disagree with the part where he goes, yeah, but you can ignore all of the people who are talking technobabble. No, the technobabble is part of the nuance, because when you want to grow markets to billions of users, that's when that stuff is incredibly important.
Right. So in a way you can agree with him and disagree with him at the same time, and that it's all that stuff is important, but the composability is maybe more important, because that gives you use cases. Yeah. That gives you use cases that makes his point. Like, so it's, agreeing with him doesn't exclude Solana.
Solana is just more nuance that you got to take into account. And that's where, so far, that's been a really big edge as just a small fry in the space, because with that, being able to go look at that technology piece gives you a big edge.
Can you still call it a small fry? I mean, it's huge at this point.
Yeah. Well, I was referring to myself as an investor.
No. I thought you meant Solana.
They're the third largest ecosystem in the space, period. Yeah. And they settle more transactions daily than all of the rest of crypto. Right, yeah. So, for me, this is much like crypto, a settled thing. I'm just waiting for the rest of everybody to catch up. Right. And I'm patient.
Yeah. So how far away are we from quantum computing? And quantum computing, while simultaneously being a threat to something like Bitcoin and potentially others, how, because of what we said about how the performance of Solana hinges on the performance of the underlying hardware, what does that do for the already fast throughput on Solana to have something like quantum computing?
So I think quantum computing affects all of cryptography at the same rate. So then whoever is optimized for performance, throughput, and settlement, like how long it takes to settle a transaction, finality is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
The benefits of one over another are still in place when you quantum proof Bitcoin and Solana and Ethereum. Like when you, because you slow them all down when you, if tomorrow there's quantum computers that can break our seed phrases, then overnight, all of these protocols have set up ways to make them quantum proof, to where you just make a much longer, key pair, I think is what I'm imagining.
Okay.
I think what you do, like if you take, what is it, AES 256 and all that, I'm not up on all these things. You just spread it out. You make a much big, to where a quantum computer can brute force something that it would have taken, 100 million years with the most powerful supercomputer of today to break without a quantum computer. Maybe that takes a few days with a quantum computer. Well, then you just roll out a new security protocol, and that's going to affect everything. That's going to be, Web 2 things.
Sure.
All are using the same encryption.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't mean from a security perspective. I mean
performance.
Does it make a difference? So is the whole debate about the performance difference between Solana and Ethereum go away because it's negligible? Like you get diminishing returns. You click a button and something happens now on both systems, both chains. Whereas,
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Does
like,
quantum? So I was addressing the
security part.
Yeah.
Does quantum take away the competitive advantage that is the performance of Solana over any of the other chains?
That is like a question I've never, like I would want to, like before I'd even try to take a stab at it, I want to go look at like what's involved in that. Because I don't know that. So quantum computing, as I understand it, is not like, you're not getting like you're not getting like like a much faster computer. You're getting quantum computing does a specific type of compute that is very useful for like code breaking.
Yeah.
A quantum bit, like a qubit with its upspin and downspin, and then all of its different positions that you get out of a single bit, create a much more powerful computer for specific use cases, is my understanding. I don't think that when we have quantum computing, we suddenly have a computer that now just makes, shuttling bits. And crunching bits.
Yeah, no, but it is going to. There are parts of that process that it might actually be applicable for.
Well, when you take quantum computing and then you also look right next to it, super intelligent, artificial general intelligence, and that like bot trading is what's been, running markets since the last 10 years. All of the S&P and all of that is bots, right? And it's traders setting up data centers as close as they can to the fiber optic backbones that connect all these networks, so they have like an edge that is in milliseconds, whatever the hell, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that math. But I think what happens is you always need at the base layer to be fully optimized for just like speed of light physics types things, like how fast you can the speed of light over fiber is pretty much, that's where unless we, open up some new dimension.
Right. Fiber is supposed to be just about.
We're kind of at the capacity of, and once we get everything optimized for light, then you've got like MEV, minor abstractable value, and that's where you got a full node sitting on a consensus network on a blockchain that now can be set up and coupled with AI to extrapolate to like if it wins and gets to be a block producer, like now suddenly it can stack the transactions up in such a way that it has a trading edge and it can front run. You're never going to take that fully out of it. And even though we're already at a point where humans are out of that loop and AI is there, AI is scaling right alongside the quantum computers with quantum computers running it. So we never get to take optimization. Like, I don't think we get to that place you described it at the beginning of the question where it's like when these things are all, the network and the hardware are running so damn fast that like, is there an edge if you couple layers for, you know, and I think, yes, there will always be an edge. There will always be a way to scale compute to provide an edge if you haven't optimized it out of it. So there's always going to be an arb. Until you, All
right.
So I could be wrong about that. But you asked me on the fly a question I never considered, and that sounds about right. Crypto. Oh, NFTs. Let's talk NFTs real quick. While we're on the subject of crypto, what do you think of NFTs?
Man, NFTs have been such a weird space for the last year and a half or so. And I didn't want to miss the boat, so I got in on a few. I didn't go crazy and spend a ton of money on like the really, really early blue chip ones like punks or any of those, but but the just broad applicability of an NFT for like daily application, I like. For art, for
tokenizing,
real estate, tokenize everything.
All
I like
real
that.
world assets.
Yes, I love the
movie
idea of
tickets,
that.
concert tickets, all that.
Totally.
That's gonna work, all of that. And is obvious.
It's obvious, but where is it? What? It's obvious.
It takes time, man.
No, I'm not trying to rush it. I'm trying to say that why wasn't that the first application? Why was it 32-bit, 16-bit PFPs? You know what I mean?
I just think it's a progression, and it's very easy to generate an NFT off of a collectible. It just seems logical to me.
And the
collectibles,
right?
The collectibles.
Yeah.
You're talking about scarcity and digital scarcity. Creating for the first time ever digital scarcity. But
the value comes from the scarcity.
Yeah. It makes sense to me that the collectible people got there first. They're always first. When you see a new way to create scarcity, the collectible people, they show up. They're the first ones because you can, by just taking a JPEG and saying this is now a scarce JPEG, that's rather trivial to do in code, much more trivial than, let's say, Ticketmaster suddenly having the capacity to process. Never mind the fact that it cost a lot of money to, like on Ethereum, to do a mint of 5,000 or 10,000, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, when they minted, the gas fees to mint all those was ridiculous. Hundreds of thousands of dollars more.
Crazy.
Yeah. So to answer your question, like Ticketmaster couldn't, the infrastructure didn't support a mint of just your.
So I get that, but I still want to understand the value of the collectible. I guess so the art itself can be with full fidelity reproduced.
Yes.
Okay? So it's not the art. Okay. Let's say it's the creator.
It represents more. Yeah, right?
Let's say it's the creator. Okay?
Yeah, it's the creator's officially sanctioned digital version of the art.
Right. But that creator can then also create the same art again, right? So all the pieces, all the inputs to that NFT are still around, are still available. Like, so you could say, Monet's work wasn't that valuable until he died, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's, even though there are people today who can reproduce a Monet, it's not with 100%.
There's not even people. There's AI that can reproduce them.
Or AI, right.
It's trivial to make a Monet.
Right, but it's AI or it's other people. That's guaranteed.
Yeah.
It's not an original Monet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you have the people who created the art, who are able to create the art again, like, where's the scarcity? It's implied scarcity. So if you created a set of 5,000 widgets, right? Yeah. And then, everyone thinks it's scarcity because there's 5,000 of them, right? And so the collectible people go out and try to gobble them up. And you come out next week and you create the same art. You're the same creator.
Yeah.
It's just different hashes.
Okay, so it's different. This is a long game.
Yeah.
As somebody who's never been into collectibles, but always watched it and kind of, garbage pail kids when I was in grade school and all that,
Yeah.
And I've never been a collector. I don't like knickknacks. My house is Spartan.
Yeah.
I've never been a collector of things, but I get the human tendency to want to flex, show, all of that makes sense. Now, your question in the beginning, I think you're right. I think that in the beginning, and I think what it's going to be in a long game is you can only mint a 2021 NFT in the year 2021.
Right.
And these blockchains are like a histogram. What's the word I want to say? Like they tell a story over time of blocks that are linked into the chain. And if you create a digital asset through your right, it's like, but I mean, all scarcity is a story. Monet's picture, you're right, was suddenly worth more after he was dead. Mm-hmm. But that's because of that part of the story, right? Like, it's all just a story we tell that we decide to allocate an outsized value. But if you look
outsized is the key term there.
Right.
Yeah.
But we all know it and we agree because we have to agree something gets to have outsized scarce valuation because we want, as a culture, as a species, a way to communicate status. Mm-hmm. And we want to more than that because part of it is like with, I would say, it's not just status, it's also community. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're a Bored Ape, you're a Solana monkey business, SMB. You're saying more than, especially when these things, I think, accrue value over time. I think, and then NFT has an opportunity because in many ways it bootstrapped all of crypto. Right. Yeah. The people who get the thesis and understand the inevitability of all this and make a bunch of money in crypto are going to want to buy something. Right. And it makes sense to me that these things are going to be the thing that like Disney had Mickey Mouse, mm-hmm. Solana has Solana Monkey Business, mm-hmm. and Degen Ape Academy, and now Mad Lads. And you're going to see, like, when I went to...
You're putting Mad Lads on the that same pedestal?
I think there'll be new ones that come in that do something fundamental. I think Mad Lads, I think Mad Lads did something fundamentally important.
I haven't seen, I don't know anything about Mad Lads, so that's why
It's a guy, Armani Ferrenti and his team, Tristan and these other guys. They set up an NFT collection, and they did some really cool things with the mint that were new. And they built it around this new capability of X NFTs, where if you have an NFT, it's a program.
Yeah.
And it's a smart contract that can be executable on the chain, and that unlocks all this really new stuff. I think NFT is going to have a progression where it's not just the early ones. I think, watching that whole ecosystem, I would say like SMB is the punks, and Degen apes are kind of in there too. There's a couple of those, I think just 2021 Solana NFTs. Yeah. If I'm right about all this other stuff. Right. And I mean, it relies on that. Then I think just any 2021 NFT generated on that chain, the year it went live, will
more valuable than
just because it was then.
Yeah.
But then somebody like a Mad Lads will show up in 2022, or I can't remember if they've minted this year, 2023. Sure, they're not 2021, but they added some fundamental capability that all NFTs now will use in the future. Right. I could see them becoming extremely valuable. So and little things like, SMB did their Gen 3 mints.
Oh yeah. So what was the story with that? Does anyone benefit anyone in Gen 2s benefit from Gen 3s?
Yes, if you hold a Gen 2 SMB, then for 12 Solana, you can mint a barrel.
Oh, right.
That is exchangeable for and I think the floors are around 17 or 18 SOL, so you can make 5 SOL. For flipping your barrel right now if you wanted. And a lot of people will do that. Or you just
sit on the barrel. So do I already have the barrel? Or do I have to buy the barrel? I have to mint the barrel.
You have to mint the barrel.
And then the barrel gets traded in for... Okay.
And they all do these game dynamics. And then there's all these... In the collector community, it's fun. Right. It's like I rolled all mine. And I made a whole bunch of barrels. Yeah. And I'll probably not turn... And then I went and bought a Gen 3. And I bought a cool one I liked.
Okay.
So because I think Solana is going to be really important, and I think SMB is going to be like the Mario.
So why not flip the barrels?
Well, there's a game theory with collectible stuff where it's like, do you take it out of the wrapper? No, you leave it in the wrapper. That's the thought.
Yeah.
So. I don't really have anything to gain, because I'm not planning on selling it. If you leave it in like barrel form, then it could be, and you don't know.
But it already exists. Like, in other words, it's already allocated to you. Like, if forever, in perpetuity, you have this barrel.
Yeah. But here's the thing. It's in barrel form. Nobody knows if it's one of the rare ones that hasn't yet been minted. So if we get down to the wire and I can't remember how many barrels or how many individual NFTs there are in the collection, but if you get to a point where there's, let's say 1,000 of them that where people leave it in the package in the barrel.
Yeah. Is that a thing? Like people are doing this?
Yeah, well, they absolutely did with other collections. They've totally done this. Because, for instance, The Gods was this, I remember. They grew up really big, and then I think they stupidly left the winning horse because they didn't. Well, they just didn't see I think they will come to regret that decision big time later on, but they're all still part of the story. Yeah. So there are people that hang on to the gods that never made them into dead gods, because that was an option. Okay. And if you made it to a dead god, well, then you could get a yield on their shit token they spun up. Oh. So there's all these things people are trying, and since I'm a long game person, I'm always just leave it in the package. Maybe it'll turn into something, maybe it won't.
Right.
And So that's like a portion of the because what you want to do is you want to, like, if you look at the real world and you compare companies like Nike and Nvidia to, like, I forget what the name of the company is that makes a collection of like Dolce, the bags. I'm so out of touch with all of that.
Dolce Gabbana, like
Dolce Gabbana,
okay.
all of these. There's some umbrella that holds a bunch of that type of stuff, and it's the most valuable stock in all markets. Is the scarce, rare, like handbags and watches and all this.
Okay.
There's some I can't remember what it was. I saw this on something Real
it's like
Vision put out.
fractional ownership?
No,
of
I'm not.
No.
It's not fractional reserve or anything. It's just shares in the actual company. It's more profitable than even like Nvidia and Apple. Like there's a company that's bigger than Apple
That owns these physical things.
that is in this category. And what I find telling about that is that that scarcity, like manufactured or otherwise, is always the most valuable commodity. So if I would say, like, if and my NFT thesis would be that of course we will manufacture scarcity in digital form, and those things will be just ridiculous. It's a way you can grow the denominator of something that's already going to grow. So if you have a lot. And that's how a lot of people are playing punks on Ethereum. If you think Ethereum is going to be the financial layer of all financial settlement money, the money of Web3, potentially one day unseating the US dollar, let's say.
With punks?
No, with Ethereum. Ether.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people in crypto who are building a thesis around that. And they're like, okay, I have that conviction. Now, how do I build the denominator? I don't want to just hold Ethereum. I can stake it, maybe get a yield. That's too boring. What if I go buy a scarce digital asset that is a collectible that allows me to hold on to that Ether, but then if Ether goes up 10x, the value of that thing in Ether goes up, let's say 10x. Oh shit. That's where I have made an exponential gain in my investment. That's how a lot of people are playing collectively. And I don't think that that's madness. I think if you look at our history, yes, we're definitely going to do that. But you have to be wise in which ones you decide to pick, because in the end of the day, you are just buying a hash on a blockchain.
It's just, it's not a very liquid thing either.
No. But I think there'll be tools later on that let you... People are already looking at this where
borrow against it,
or borrow it for a time so that you can get some community feature. Like renting a car. You could rent an NFT that lets you go to that cool meetup.
How come that's not around?
That's happening. They're building all that shit.
That needs to be there.
That
would be cool.
It's all getting built. And then these things will, but then that requires a lot of foresight. You got to be able to you have to build the vision of that as an inevitable trajectory for where we're headed, and then you have to pick really good horses. Like you have to pick the projects that are going to have. So for me, it seems like just a little bit of these ones that seem like they have historic significance seem like a safe place to park things. And then,
that's all I've bought, and then there's the random free ones that get sent your way, and I don't do anything with those, but
same. And I like those because maybe 2021, and so I don't get rid of anything. I just let it sit there in accrue. And that actually tells a story about the wallet too. I think the wallet ends up becoming sort of valuable too at some point. I don't know how those would trade hands, but maybe they will generationally.
In the Middle East, there's totally this concept of not just scarcity, but this being able to project. I'll just give you an example. So, like in Dubai, for example, like the royal family have the license plates are like small numbers, like 1. Right. You've heard of that. And in Kuwait, people buy phone numbers still. Like I
Really?
couldn't tell you what 90%
Vanity phone number?
vanity phone numbers. What 90% of the phone numbers in my phone are. I just know, this is because
Right.
your phone does all the work for you.
Yeah.
But over there, they still, like, especially people of the slightly older generation, they want a number that's easy to remember.
Sure.
787-7777. That is like, so if you can go and find who has that number and you can pay them to transfer it
And they
to you,
will. And
they
it has
will.
value.
So
And
that's just,
it's in our nature.
so
Of course we're going to
yeah,
do
I
this.
totally get the wallet tells the story. If someone can sort of take ownership of your wallet because it has that story
Yeah.
and pay you in some other way
Right.
to own it, then yeah.
Or if a famous celebrity holds that wallet. And
There's
maybe the
definitely
wallet
that.
doesn't matter. Maybe it'll be the domain that's associated with the wallet.
Yes,
Because you can
right.
buy a domain for a wallet in
I did.
crypto.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah,
I did.
I bought a bunch of them just because
Me too.
playing that game,
Why not?
they cost nothing now.
Right.
Maybe one day, like almost every word that's like 5 letters as a .com is extraordinarily valuable in this
Right.
time we live in.
It's true. This is
You
true.
could just pick a bucket of those, and everybody plays these games who are in a space where they've done all. This takes a lot of homework, and a lot of it's boring. And
Yeah.
I don't think you can get to the place where this is inevitable without doing a lot of that. I don't.
Yeah, those are all things that I do just to hedge, but they don't excite me. The excitement around NFT for me is something like a real estate tokenizing things.
Yeah.
That excites me because I think
About when we can cut out realtors and title companies and all of
just a
this
lot
is
of
just
the
settled
middle-
on chain by smart contracts.
Oh,
That's totally going to happen.
title insurance and title searches and all that stuff
Don't
just
need that shit anymore.
goes away. You can just have the whole history
It's-
right there, indisputable. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great.
It's just a progression. It'll take time.
Yeah.
And we're going to see it in the next 15 years.
That's
I think,
exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Nasser, we've been going for quite a while now. I don't really have a clock running, but I
like
think
2.5, 2:20.
2:20. Yeah.
Well, it's 1:20 now, but it's 2
We
hours,
were-
20 minutes, something like that.
We ran for a bit. This is a badass conversation. So much fun to do.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you for coming back and doing it. Look forward to the next one.
Yes, same here.
Right on. Viewers, listeners, subscribers. Viewers, listeners who haven't subscribed, please subscribe. That's cool. I appreciate that. Share it with your friends if you liked it. And I'll be back soon with this guy to do this again. And thank you so much. All right.
Now it's coming around, you're feeling cut down and in the ground, and so we all come together. We making a sound, we sing. Look at all this love we found. Got